Manjaro never ceases to amaze me. It's one of my favorite distributions. It's based on Arch. It's a rolling release. And even though it's a rolling release, every time they actually put out a new release, which is technically a new snapshot, they always manage to include new features. And in this release, in 18.1, which is put out just recently, they are advertising a choice of which Office suite that you can go with, better desktop integration, and support for flat paks and the like. So I have my System 76 Lemur right here, and I figured I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot. I know I'm a bit late getting around to this one, but I definitely wanted to give you guys my impressions of Manjaro 18.1. We're going to try the XFCE edition. I have my flash drive right here already ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in, and we're going to get started. So here on my laptop, you can see that I'm still running Netrunner from a previous review, so I'm going to go ahead and reboot. So here I am on the boot menu of my laptop. Just to show you, I am using real hardware. I am not going to be installing this on a virtual machine. This is actually going to be installed on the disk on my Lemur here, so I'll choose the flash drive. I never knew why it was called PMAP, but you know what? I don't ask any questions. It was cheap anyway. Let's press enter. And here we have the default Manjaro boot splash that you get from the USB media when you create a bootable flash drive with the ISO image. You can barely see it. I think that the highlight is kind of faint here, but it's highlighted on boot Manjaro x86-64 XFCE. But I also have other options here, so I can go up to driver equals free, and I can change that. This is probably good for those of you that have an NVIDIA card, for example, but my Lemur has just integrated graphics. It doesn't require any proprietary drivers, so I'm not going to change that. So what I will do is actually boot, so I'll choose that option here. All right, so here I am at the default desktop. I'm not going to check out anything just yet, but I'm going to go right into the installation. So first I need to be connected to the internet. So the Wi-Fi icon is right here, so I'll click on that and I will select my network. Type in my super secret password. All right, and I am connected to my Wi-Fi. Now to get the installation started, I can simply click Launch Installer. If I was to close this window, I could launch the installer from this icon right here. There's also an icon for Manjaro Architect that we can use to create a custom installation if we'd like. I'm going to go ahead and launch the installer. And let's see if anything has changed. As you can see, I have booted into Manjaro Linux 18.1. I don't know how to pronounce that. Is it Juhraya? I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. But anyway, I'm going to select the default of American English here. It defaulted to Detroit, which is pretty much the closest point to me, which is kind of scary it knew that. Actually, I know how it knew that. But so that's cool that it automatically detected that. I didn't have to change anything. And if you use a different keyboard type, right here you can go ahead and change that. I'll leave mine as default. And we have some partition options. So up here at the top, I could select my disk. I only have one, so there's no other option here. But if you had more than one, you should see the hard drives up here at the top. You could install alongside your current operating system. You can replace a partition. You can erase the entire disk, or you could do a manual partitioning scheme here. So I'm going to just erase the entire disk. I have no data on here that I would like to keep. So it's defaulting to no swap. If I click on this, I have swap with no hibernate or swap with hibernate. I assume that just determines how much swap it's going to allocate. Let's see if I'm right. So I'm going to choose no hibernate. And it looks like it's going to give me about 8.8 gigabytes of swap. If I choose with hibernate, it's going to make that much larger. So in regards to swap, I get this question quite a bit. Is it necessary? And you'll have some elitists out there that'll basically say, no, you don't need swap anymore. That's not true because it really depends on the application. Some applications swap a little bit and might behave erratically if there is no swap available. So given the fact that SSDs have wear leveling now, so using too much really isn't so much of an issue. If you're swapping constantly, that's a bigger problem. So wear leveling, makes that not an issue. But then also, the fact is hard drives are cheaper, SSDs are getting cheaper. So it doesn't make sense to me to withhold a couple of gigabytes for swap. Well, let's just use swap. I think it's easier and, it's not going to cause any harm by being present on your hard drive. And if any applications require it, it's going to be available. In my case, I'll just choose swap without hibernate. I'm going to choose to encrypt my system, and let's give it a strong password. All right, let's go ahead and click next. And here's a typical user setup screen, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill this out. Put in my password. And I can log in automatically, but I'd rather not do that. Use the same password for the administrator account. Yep, I will go ahead and do that. That just sets up sudo. So now we have an option of which Office suite we would like to install. We can install None, LibreOffice, or FreeOffice. So in regards to which Office suite to use, it's really up to you. You can't go wrong with LibreOffice, and then there's FreeOffice available as well. FreeOffice, despite the name, isn't completely free. You can see in the verbiage down here, it's basically saying for long-term use, request a free product key directly in the application. And that's not something that you're going to have to deal with if you're using LibreOffice. Now, in my opinion, go with LibreOffice, unless you have a specific reason not to. Some people will say LibreOffice isn't as good as Microsoft Office, which is just not true. I've written all 4 of my books professionally published with LibreOffice. And if you're able to professionally publish books, send the draft to a publisher and they're accepting of the format, then there really is no issue with LibreOffice, despite what anyone might say. It's definitely a good Office suite. Now, personally, I've never tried FreeOffice because I've never had a reason to, so I can't really speak on what's different about it. But if you're curious, go ahead and give it a shot. So in my case, I would normally choose LibreOffice here, but I'm going to go outside of my comfort zone and choose FreeOffice because I've never used it before. So I'd be interested to see what it looks like and what the experience is like. So that's the one that I'm going to choose. And then I'll click Next. So at this point, it's just giving me a summary of what it wants to do for me. It's going to set my location, set up the keyboard, and the partitioning scheme. So I'll go ahead and accept that. And this will wipe the disk and all the data on it. So hopefully, if you're following along with me, you have already backed up your data. Click Install. Install now. Here we go. Okay, as you can see here, we're all done. Manjaro 18.1 is installed. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a reboot, and then we're going to check it out and dive right into this new release. Check the Restart Now box, and done, and let's see what happens. Okay, so right away, it's asking me for my encryption password. Now, I kind of miss Pop! OS in this aspect because it shows a really cool professional screen asking for your password. If I didn't know any better, I would probably think this was an error message. If you've been using computers as long as I have, if you see any combination of white text on a black background or any one font color and one background color message, you're probably going to have cause for alarm. But I'm going to go ahead and put in the password. Okay, so here we have the default login screen. So let's go ahead and log in. So I have a message here that says Wi-Fi networks are available. Now during the installation, I did actually put in the password for my wireless network, and it did not retain that for the actual installation. Now, several distributions that I've tried lately, they do actually maintain that. So it's kind of surprising that Manjaro doesn't. It's not a big deal. I'll enter in the password and then it'll be saved from that point forward. But it's just kind of interesting that they didn't make that get retained. So I'll go ahead and do that again. All right, so I'm connected, and as always, the first thing you should do when you set up a new distribution is run the updater. So I'll do that now. And we can see, even though Manjaro 18.1 hasn't been out all that long, we do have updates here. So I'll go ahead and install them. All right, so the system is up to date. And normally what I would do is reboot the system to make sure that I have everything applied, but I didn't see anything in the list of things that were being updated that would imply that a reboot is necessary. I didn't see a kernel update or driver package update or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just refrain from rebooting right now because I think it's fine. And close that. So now that we are installed and upgraded, we can go ahead and check out the release. So right away, I think that the Manjaro look and feel, this is the XFCE edition, is very KDE-like. I mean, the panel is about the same size as KDE would be. It's got the single panel layout with the tray icons down here on the bottom right. I mean, you could argue that this is probably Windows-like more than KDE-like, but I think it's fine. I actually do like this layout. I think that the default icon size is way too small. It's smaller than the actual text labels underneath. And the text labels are kind of cut off here, which looks kind of amateurish in my opinion. But other than that one small quirk, I think the default wallpaper, the theme, and everything else actually looks fairly professional. So I have no problems there. And then, of course, you get your Manjaro Hello window when you first log in. You can basically disable it by clicking this button right here so it doesn't appear the next time you log in. But you get links to the forums, chat rooms, and whatnot for support. There's links to the documentation. So, for example, we can bring up the release info. And it gives you some information about Manjaro 18.1. And I like how they built this into the actual window instead of just launching a web browser. I kind of thought that that's exactly what they would do. But it's pretty cool that they built this right in. And then if you'd like to get involved and help them out, you can do that. And here's some information here on what you can do to help the Manjaro project if you find it useful. So I'll go ahead and minimize this. Anyway, let's check out that Office suite. So if you remember, I installed free Office when I was given the choice here. So I'll go to the Office section, and one of the first things that I notice is that there's no Microsoft Office icons here in the Office section. In the previous release, it had some Microsoft Office icons here, but which were basically links to the Office 365 apps online. So basically just a web container, which I didn't really like. I didn't ask for Microsoft software on my system. I would prefer to be asked. And I don't see those icons here, so they didn't include that, which is good for me. But then a downside could be if you actually enjoyed having those icons, you don't have them here. And maybe they could have made that another option in the same menu where you select your Office suite. But that doesn't really affect me at all. Just something that I wanted to mention. So I'm going to go ahead and open FreeOffice Text Maker. All right, and this is interesting. It is asking me for my preferred interface. I kind of like this dark one right here, so I'm going to go with that. And I'm not going to enable touch mode. I don't have a touch screen. And I'll click OK. I'm just going to go ahead and avoid that. So here we have Text Maker, which I assume, judging by the appearance, is their word processor. So that'd be equivalent to LibreOffice Writer. And so far, it's very Microsoft Office-like, but that's my fault because I did choose that style when I chose it. I chose it because I like the color gradients being darker. So I do like the look of the interface more than LibreOffice. So I'd be interested to give this a shot and kind of see what I think long term. It does look professional. I do like the layout, so there's that. I think this might actually be something I could use. And you know, if it requires a license, I don't mind paying for something if it's useful, if it's supporting an open source project, which I'm not sure if these guys are open source. Again, I'm not really familiar with this, but it might be something that I'll check out and learn more about. And I have a little shopping cart icon here. Let's see what that does. So this looks like SoftMaker Office is the more professional version. So I would be able to upgrade to that if I'd like to. It's a monthly charge, which I don't really like. I usually prefer, well, that's because it says subscribe. So if I go to purchase, you know what? It's still cheaper than Microsoft Office. So I wouldn't mind paying for this if this is something that I would find more useful than LibreOffice. Now, again, I've written all my books with LibreOffice and it's totally fine. But if anything about FreeOffice makes my workflow better, I'd consider working with it. But, you know, it's just something that I might consider, and if I do decide to use it, I'll let you guys know in a future video. Anyway, I'll go ahead and close out of here. So out of curiosity, I'm going to go back here to the Office menu, and I'm going to go to Presentations, which is basically going to be PowerPoint, just pretty much exactly that. So no surprises there. And then we also had something called Plan Maker. And that's an interesting name for essentially Excel or equivalent to LibreOffice Calc. It looks great. It's another file format that I use, so it's something I would also be using. And honestly, I basically just use word processing and I use spreadsheets, but I do sometimes do presentations, but all three are represented here. So my use case is actually met with this application. So again, I'll give it some more time and see what I like about it. But for right now, I think it's, you know, your basic Office suite, so no surprises there. I'm also curious about other applications that might be installed here. So I'll go ahead and open this back up here. So we have the terminal emulator. So it's defaulting to XFCE4 terminal, which, you know, is actually a pretty good terminal. So no problem there. I personally like Terminator on low resource machines or distributions that use fewer resources like XFCE. I'll often use that terminal emulator, but this is fine. I like that actually. And I like the bright green text here. So everything kind of still pops even though it's a transparent window. I have seen some distributions with hard to read text, but this actually looks like a color scheme that I would actually like to use. So good job on that. Web browser, Firefox, which we received the latest version when I ran the updates. As of the time I'm recording this video, you know, we're at 69.0.1, but it does take me some time to get my videos edited. So by the time you're seeing this, we probably have a newer version of Firefox. Mail reader, we have Thunderbird, which, you know, I remember seeing in the update window, and it's asking me to create an account. I like Thunderbird. It's actually what I use on a daily basis, so that's awesome. Add remove software. So if you wanted to install new things, this is what you would use to do that. So let's see, go to groups, and what do we have here? So see if there's games. And there's not. So I was hoping to see categories here. But I'm going to go back and search for Steam. I think that's usually a good test. And Steam Manjaro, which I guess must be a customized version. And it says remove, which would give me the inclination that it's already installed. Is it? Let's go ahead and, yeah, actually it is. Now, Steam is something that I always install on all of my Linux installations because, you know, when work is done, it's time to play some games. whether it be Final Fantasy VI, my favorite game of all time, basically, or any other game that was made available for Linux. I'm glad to have that available. Now, my only problem, though, is not everyone uses Steam, so it would have been nice to have a choice whether or not I wanted it. Now, in my case, it works out great because I'd install it if it wasn't there. But, if you're installing this on a company's computer for an employee's workstation, for example, don't blame them if they're playing Steam games. It's Manjaro's fault because they included that. So here I am on the Steam window. I'm going to go ahead and log into my account. Go ahead and log in. All right, so I'll put in my secret code that I just received by email. So far everything is working exactly the same as it should. And I'm not going to remember this computer because I will probably be blowing this installation away. This is just a test machine. There we go. All right, so here we are. I have my main Steam window, so I'll just go ahead and narrow my selection down to SteamOS games or Linux games. I have a lot of non-Linux games purchased because I use, forgot what they call it, but their compatibility layer to go ahead and play those games. But these are all the games that are basically native Linux or supported in Linux in some form or fashion. Now, obviously, this machine is not going to play Doom with integrated graphics. Final Fantasy VI is a good test because it's so easy to install, it's quick, and it doesn't require a lot of resources. So I'll go ahead and install it. Create a desktop shortcut, why not? And agree. And finish. All right, Final Fantasy VI is installed. I'm going to go ahead and launch it and give it a shot. Get this window out of the way. Now, I haven't been playing this version, so every time I show off this game, I'm pretty much in the same spot. But, it's just an easy game to see whether or not Steam works, and it's probably my #1 most important priority to make sure this game works. And you can see that it does. So the Steam integration in Manjaro actually works, so that is awesome. All right, and I have a cool Final Fantasy VI icon on my desktop. How cool is that? All right, so next thing I'm going to do is launch this application. I don't know how to pronounce that, but this is pretty cool. So with this application, Bao, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. I know I'm probably butchering that. But it allows you to install Flatpak or Snap applications. And if you prefer not to have one basically offered to you, you can uncheck it. So if I wanted no Flatpaks, I could have Snaps, but there's only a few here. And then I can, of course, just select both. Now, why does this matter? So the concept of universal apps is relatively new and it's catching on in the world of Linux. So essentially with every distribution, you have their own package format. Debian and Debian-based distributions use deb packages with the apt install or apt upgrade or apt suite of commands. And then you have Fedora, which uses DNF, CentOS, which uses yum. Arch Linux uses the pacman command to install packages. So as a developer would have to make their application available in several different formats to support all of those different distributions. The benefit of universal applications is that a developer could compile it one time for either Snap or Flatpak, and automatically that application would be compatible on any Linux distribution that supports that Flatpak or Snap or whatever they choose to compile it in. And I think that's really important. And as you can see here, we have several applications available for us. And if any of these are any that you would actually want to benefit from, you can go ahead and install it. I use Spotify, for example, so I'm going to go ahead and install that. And I'll say yes. I'm going to make sure that this works. I can't actually play audio for you because I'll get a takedown notice, but at the very least, I'll make sure that it launches. All right, it says installation complete. And interesting, now that I installed that, it only shows one item here. So let me refresh this. That's interesting. Let me go ahead and restart this app. So maybe I'm doing something wrong or I just encountered a bug. Either way, it did let me install Spotify. So let me go ahead and launch that. Make sure it works. And as you can see, it does. So obviously I can't play any audio for you, otherwise I might get a takedown notice. But if you're looking for something to listen to, and if you're a fan of metal, I highly recommend the new Lacuna Coil album, Black Anima. It is awesome. But anyway, I'll go ahead and close this. So overall, I am very impressed with this release. Now there's no major changes here. There's just some really good smaller changes. And one of the things that I noticed is that fewer applications are installed by default. I like that a lot because it gives me an opportunity to decide what I want. Now, yes, Steam is installed and there's a few others. You can easily remove those. So that's not really an issue, but it does seem lighter to me as far as, installed applications go. And I think that just kind of makes it look more, makes it look cleaner, for example. And the look and feel is great. And I also like the utility they include to help you install flat packs and snap packages. I think universal applications are the future, and they seem to understand that. And they also don't cater to one more than the other. Some distributions, they might lean towards snap packages, and then other distributions might lean towards flat packs. But it looks to me like Manjaro, they're not really going one way or the other. They're letting you decide which one you want. And I think that's actually the right way to do it. Now, even though I ran into a small issue with their utility, not refreshing the list properly, that's probably a bug or maybe even something that I'm doing wrong. So it's a rolling release. I'll just run my updates in a few days and see if that gets fixed. But overall, I really like this release. Now, one question you might be wondering then is, if I like Manjaro, why don't I run it as my daily driver? And I used to back in the day, some years ago. I think it was 2012 or thereabout. And I ran it as my daily driver and loved it. But why I stopped using it, I don't actually remember. But I know one thing that makes me nervous about Manjaro is that the same reason I get nervous about any other, what I call a boutique distribution, where you have a small number of developers that decide to fork something, or they get an existing distribution and they spin it off into their own thing. That's not a bad thing. I love the fact that they're able to exercise their creativity. But, with Ubuntu, for example, we have a big company that's behind it to make sure that they have resources with the security updates. And then, Fedora, has funding by Red Hat and so on. So I generally tend to cater to those distributions, although as of late, I've been using Pop! OS. But you know what? That's not really a problem with Manjaro anymore. I don't really feel like I can call them a boutique distribution because they're actually a company now. And I really feel more confident about possibly using Manjaro as my daily driver than I ever have before. So for example, I'm going to bring up my web browser right here. And I have this Forbes article pulled up that is talking about the fact that Manjaro made a massive announcement about becoming an actual company. And, they give you the details here. I'm not going to go ahead and read this article to you. But basically, in short summary, it just means Manjaro has just become a lot more legit. And that is awesome. But that's not all. Let's go to the Manjaro website. And maybe I haven't been to the Manjaro website in a long time, but it seems a lot better to me. I mean, this website is awesome. But one thing that caught my attention is I clicked on news here. And you get a lot of information about what they're testing and working on. I mean, look at all of this. So if you wanted to test something, or you're running the testing distribution, for example, they're keeping you very up to date with what they're working on, so you know what to look out for if you're running a testing build. And that is really awesome as well. So if I click on news, I noticed this article right here posted on their website, the 15th of September, about Polybar. Somebody noticed that there was a problem with it. It wasn't launching. So they put out a news article to let everybody know that they're basically releasing a new update to fix it. So, I mean, all we ever really ask is that rolling distributions release updates to fix problems, but they did one better, and then they released a news article about it. So that is awesome. I like the fact that they did that, and the website just looks great. Everything looks more legit. And you know what? I just really love the look and feel. It's simple, it's clean, the theme is great. The presentation is great, it's fast, it has Steam integrated, which might work against somebody in a company, but works good for me because I get Final Fantasy VI pretty easily, so that's pretty awesome. Installing updates is really easy to do because we have a graphical utility that allows us to basically work with our packages, including updates. We can easily select our Wi-Fi network. And perhaps one of my favorite features is if I right-click this icon here and go to kernels, and this is not new if you've heard or watched any of my previous reviews here, but you could choose to install a different kernel. So right now I have, what do I have? Kernel 5.2.11 is what I have on my install here. And if I wanted to go with a different version, I can do that. And that is awesome because if you have something that's not compatible with your applications or whatever it is you're doing, you can select a different kernel. Now right here it tells you which one is running and installed. Normally you almost always have a newer version. This is an experimental one right here because it's a release candidate, but sometimes there could be new features in a Linux kernel that you really want. You don't want to wait for whenever Manjaro gets around to switching. You can basically install it yourself. That is awesome. One of the examples of why you would want to do this is AMD FreeSync support landed in Linux kernels either 5.0 or 5.1. Obviously, we have 5.2, but in the past, before we had newer kernel versions, we were able to update to that and go ahead and start using it. So overall, I'm really impressed with this release. And I'm going to be testing it on other machines. If I run into anything noteworthy or something that might make a good video, I'll consider doing that. But so far, I do recommend that you check this out. Go ahead and give it a download, back up your data, install it, and then let me know in the comments below what you think of Manjaro. Thanks for checking out my video. I really appreciate it. If you found it useful, click that like button. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe so you'll see the latest content as soon as it becomes available. If you want to help me out, there's links down below for my Patreon page, as well as links for purchasing my Linux books, and also my affiliate store, which has a listing of Linux-compatible hardware that I've actually tested personally. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.